The large teaching room buzzed with excited sounds from many different types of beings. Professor Zelenothi walked slowly to the front of the class, her blue skin shining under the bright lights. Her 4 arms moved gracefully as she turned on the big screen that would show pictures to the students. "Good morning, Class 12, she said in her musical voice. The sounds in the room got quieter as all the students looked at her. "Today, we will learn about the most dangerous creatures in our galaxy. We will study monsters from Deathworlds that no smart being should ever visit." Marcus Chen sat in the back row of the classroom. He was the only human in the room, and he looked very different from his classmates. While the other students had scales, tentacles, or glowing parts on their bodies, Marcus looked plain and simple. He had brown hair, brown eyes, and wore basic clothes. In his hands, he held an old-fashioned pen and a piece of paper. The other students found Marcus strange. Most beings in the galaxy use mind links or floating computer screens to take notes. But Marcus wrote everything down with his pen, making small scratches on the white paper. Some students would look back at him and whisper to each other about the weird human who used such old tools. Professor Zelenothi pressed a button, and the big screen came to life. "Before we begin," she said, "I must warn all of you, what you will see today might give you bad dreams. These creatures are so dangerous that even looking at pictures of them can cause fear or sickness in some species." A student in the front row raised a tentacle. It was Blubder, a water-breathing being from the peaceful ocean world of Aquanus. Professor Blubder asked in a bubbly voice, "Why do we need to learn about these monsters if we should never go near them?" "Very good question," the professor answered. "Knowledge keeps us safe. If you know what dangers exist, you will never make the mistake of going to these terrible worlds. Even our best space explorers avoid death worlds at all costs," Marcus wrote something on his paper and looked up with interest. He seemed calm, unlike his classmates who were already looking nervous. A few seats away from him, a tall gray being called Zixmal was shaking slightly. Zixmal came from a world where the most dangerous animal was something like a space rabbit. "Now," Professor Zelenothi continued, "let me show you our first example." The screen changed to show a dark, rocky planet covered in red clouds. "This is Kreolok Prime, a Class 11 death world. The gravity here is 3 times stronger than most worlds we live on. The air is full of poison, and the ground temperature can melt most metals." The students gasped and made worried sounds. Some of the smaller beings moved closer together for comfort. Marcus just kept writing notes, his face showing no fear at all. "But the real danger," the professor said, "comes from the creatures that live there." The screen now showed a huge beast with 6 legs and teeth as long as swords. Its skin looked like black metal, and green liquid dripped from its mouth. "This is a acrylic render. It is 30 feet long and weighs as much as a small spaceship." Blubder made a scared bubbling sound and hid behind his desk. Other students covered their eyes or turned away from the screen. Marcus leaned forward to get a better look. Still writing on his paper, "The render can spit acid that will eat through starship armor in seconds," Professor Zelenothi explained. "Its claws can cut through almost anything, and it hunts in packs of 20 or more. When our people first found Kreolok Prime, we sent a team of 50 brave explorers. Only 2 came back, and they needed months of mind healing to forget what they saw." Marcus raised his hand. The professor noticed him and nodded. "Yes, Marcus. How fast can these renders run?" Marcus asked in a calm voice. The professor looked surprised by the question. Most students would ask how to avoid such creatures, not about their speed. "Well," she said slowly, "they can run about 60 miles per hour, even in the heavy gravity of their world." Marcus wrote this down and raised his hand again. "What do they eat?" "They eat anything that moves," the professor answered, "and also anything that does not move. They're always hungry and will attack anything they find." Some students made sick sounds at this news. A small furry being called Pipinik actually fainted and had to be helped by her friends. But Marcus just nodded and kept taking notes. Professor Zelenothi moved to the next picture. Here we have the venom moons of Celerdith. These moons orbit a dying star, and the radiation has created the most poisonous creatures in known space. The screen showed snake-like beings that seemed to glow with their own light. They moved through purple trees, in a sickly green landscape. These death serpents are only 3 feet long, but one bite can kill a full-grown Adlarian in less than 10 seconds. The poison spreads so fast that even our best medicines cannot stop it. Marcus raised his hand once more. Professor, how do these serpents avoid poisoning themselves when they bite each other? This question made Professor Zelenothi pause. It was another strange question. Most beings would want to know how to cure the poison or how to avoid the serpents completely. That is actually a very good scientific question, Marcus. They have special blood that fights against their own poison. As the class continued, Marcus kept asking these odd questions. While his classmates grew more scared with each new monster, Marcus seemed to get more interested. He asked about hunting patterns, about what the creatures ate, about how they raised their babies. Professor Zelenothi began to notice something strange about the human student. Marcus showed no fear at all. In fact, he seemed fascinated by these deadly creatures that terrified every other being in the room. She wondered what kind of world could create a person who found such monsters interesting instead of scary. The class period was almost over, but Professor Zelenothi had many more horrible creatures to show them. She looked at her notes and smiled, in a way that would have scared most students even more. Tomorrow, she announced, we will learn about the most dangerous death world of all. A planet so terrible that it has been marked as Class 12, never approach under any circumstances in our galactic database. The students made worried sounds, wondering what could be worse than what they had already seen. In the back row, Marcus packed up his simple pen and paper, looking forward to the next lesson. He had no idea that tomorrow he would learn about his own home. The next day, Marcus walked into the classroom, carrying his simple pen and paper like always. His alien classmates were already sitting in their seats, but they looked much more nervous than yesterday. Word had spread around the academy about Professor Zelenothi's promise to show them the worst death world of all. Blubter was making worried bubble sounds in his water tank. Zixmel kept looking at the door as if he wanted to run away. Even Pippinick, who had fainted yesterday, was sitting far back in her chair with her furry hands covering her eyes. Marcus sat down in his usual spot in the back row and got his pen ready. He looked around at his scared classmates and wondered why they seemed so frightened. After all, they were just learning about animals from different worlds. Professor Zelenothi entered the room looking very serious. Her blue skin seemed darker today, and all 4 of her arms moved in slow, careful ways. She walked to the front and looked at each student for a long moment. Yesterday, we learned about Class 11 death worlds, she began. Today, we will study something much worse. But first, let me show you more creatures from the worlds we already discussed. The big screen lit up with a new picture. This time it showed a creature that looked like a giant spider, but it had metal-like skin and eyes that glowed red. This is a steel web hunter from the metal forests of Gorvak. Builds traps made of metal wires that can cut a person in half. Several students made 6 sounds. Marcus wrote down notes about the creature's web-building behavior and raised his hand. Yes, Marcus, the professor said. How does it make the metal wires? Does it eat metal to create them in its body? Professor Zelenothi looked surprised again. You ask very strange questions, Marcus. Yes, it eats metal and changes it inside its body to make the wires stronger than our best steel. Marcus nodded and wrote this down. He seemed pleased with the answer, while his classmates looked ready to be sick. Now, the professor continued, let me show you the acid lakes of Melter Prime. The screen showed a world covered in bright green lakes that bubbled and smoked.
Ow.
Nothing can live in these lakes except for one creature. A new picture appeared. It showed something that looked like a fish, but it was as big as a whale and had teeth everywhere on its body. Even its fins had small teeth on them. This is a lake dissolver, Professor Zelenothi explained. It swims in pure acid and eats anything that falls into the water. The acid that would kill most creatures in seconds is like normal water to this monster. Ippanik made a small crying sound and put her head down on her desk. Other students were turning green or changing colors in ways That showed they felt sick. Marcus raised his hand again. Does it ever come out of the acid lakes? Why would you want to know that? Asked Zixmal in a shaky voice. I am just curious about how it lives, Marcus answered calmly. Professor Zelenothi looked at Marcus with growing interest. Actually, yes. During mating season, they come onto land for 3 days. During those 3 days, nothing else on the planet can survive outside of underground shelters. Marcus wrote this down with the same calm expression he always had. The professor was starting to find his behavior very strange. Every other student in the room was terrified, but Marcus acted like they were talking about normal, everyday animals. Let me show you one more creature before we move to our main topic, the professor said. The screen changed to show a world covered in ice and snow. This is Freeze Death, a world where the temperature never goes above -100 degrees. The new creature looked like a bear, but it was white as snow and had claws as long as swords. Its breath came out as clouds of ice, and wherever it stepped, the ground froze even more. The Frost Stalker, Professor Zelenothi said, it hunts by freezing its prey solid, then breaking them into pieces to eat. Its breath is so cold it can freeze metal and make it break like glass. Marcus leaned forward with interest. How does it keep from freezing itself? It has special blood that never freezes, no matter how cold it gets, the professor answered. She was definitely noticing how different Marcus was from the other students. And how big do they get? Marcus asked. About 12 feet tall when they stand up on their back legs. Marcus nodded and made more notes. Blubder was making such worried bubble sounds that his water tank was shaking. Zixmal had turned completely gray with fear. Now, Professor Zelenothi said in a very serious voice, we come to the worst death world in our galactic database. The screen went black for a moment. What I am about to show you is so dangerous that some species have banned even talking about it. She pressed a button, and new words appeared on the screen. Planet classification, Deathworld Class 12, never. Approach under any circumstances. This world was discovered only recently, the professor continued. Our best exploration team went there to study it. Half of them did not come back. The ones who returned needed months of mind healing and still have bad dreams, Marcus put down his pen for the first time and gave the professor his full attention. Something about her serious tone made him curious. The creatures on this world are so dangerous that even our computer minds cannot understand how anything survives there. The gravity is close to standard, and the air seems breathable, but that just makes it more terrifying. It looks like a world where people could live, but it is actually a nightmare. The screen showed a blue and green planet that looked beautiful from space. It had white clouds and large oceans. It looked peaceful and safe. Do not let its appearance fool you, Professor Zelenothi warned. This planet, known in our files as Sol 3 or Terra, contains more deadly creatures per square mile than any other world we have found. Marcus felt something cold move through his chest. Sol 3. Terra. Those names sounded very familiar to him, but he could not remember why. Tomorrow, the professor said, we will learn about the monsters that live on this terrible world. We'll discuss the most frightening discovery of all. Somehow intelligent beings live there too. Beings that have survived on a world that should have killed them long ago. As the class ended and students hurried out of the room, Marcus sat still in his chair. Terra, Sol 3. The names kept repeating in his mind. He had a strange feeling that tomorrow's lesson was going to be very different from what he expected. Marcus arrived at class early the next day. He could not stop thinking about the names Professor Zelenothi had mentioned. Sol 3. Terra. Something about those words made his heart beat faster, but he still could not remember why they seemed so important. The other students came into the room looking even more scared than before. Some of them had brought friends for support. Blubter had filled his water tank with extra calm medicine that made the water look pink. Zixmal was shaking so much that his chair was moving. Professor Zelenothi walked in carrying a special warning device. The device would make loud sounds if any student became too scared and needed medical help. She had never needed to bring one to class before. Before we begin today, she announced, I want to remind everyone that what you will see is real. These creatures actually exist. If anyone feels too scared, please press the red button on your desk and medical help will come right away. Marcus looked around and saw that every student except him had their hand close to the red button. He did not understand why they were so frightened. They were just going to look at pictures of animals. Now, Professor Zelenothi said, "Let me show you the Deathworld called Terra." The screen showed the same blue and green planet from yesterday. It looked so peaceful and beautiful that it was hard to believe it could be dangerous. Terra orbits a yellow star in a system the locals call Sol. That is why we sometimes call it Sol 3, the third planet from their star. The professor pressed another button. What makes this world so terrifying is not just the monsters that live there. It is also the fact that somehow intelligent beings have survived on this nightmare planet. Marcus felt his heart jump. Sol. Yellow star. Third planet. Those words were making his memory work, but everything was still fuzzy. The intelligent beings call themselves humans, Professor Zelenothi continued. Our research team could not understand how these humans survived. They live right next to the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, and they act like it is normal. The word humans hit Marcus like a cold wave. Suddenly, everything became clear. Sol 3, Terra, Earth, his home planet. The planet where he was born and grew up. These aliens were talking about his world like it was a place of monsters and nightmares. "Me show you the first creature our team found?" the professor said. The screen changed to show a large gray animal with huge teeth and small eyes. This is called a hippopotamus. It looks slow and harmless, but it kills more humans every year than almost any other creature on Terra. Marcus almost laughed out loud. A hippo? They thought hippos were terrifying monsters? He remembered going to the zoo as a child and watching hippos swim around in their pool. His little sister had always said they looked funny when they opened their big mouths. Blubter made scared bubble sounds. How big is this monster? About 14 feet long. And it weighs as much as a small vehicle, the professor answered. But the worst part is how fast it can move. It can run 30 miles per hour on land and swim even faster in water. And it has the strongest bite of any land animal on Terra. Marcus wanted to raise his hand and tell them that hippos were not. That's scary. People went on boats near hippos all the time, so you had to be careful. But they were not nightmare monsters. But something made him stay quiet. He was starting to understand that his classmates saw his world very differently than he did. This next creature, Professor Zelenothi said, is even worse. The screen showed a great white shark swimming in blue water. The humans call this a great white shark. It is a perfect killing machine that has not changed for millions of years because it does not need to change. It is already perfect at hunting. Several students pressed their red buttons. Medical workers came running into the room to help students who were having fear attacks. Pipinik had fainted again, and Zixmal was making high-pitched sounds of terror. Marcus stared at the screen in amazement. He had gone swimming in the ocean many times. Yes, he was always careful about sharks, but millions of people swam in the ocean every day without problems. Shark attacks were so rare that they made the news when they happened. This monster, the professor continued, can smell one drop of blood in water from 3 miles away. It can bite with the force of 12 tons per square inch. And here is the most terrifying part. The humans swim in the same water as these creatures, on purpose, for fun. The classroom was now half empty because so many students had needed medical help. The ones who remained looked like they were about to be sick. But wait, Professor Zelenothi said, it gets worse. A new picture appeared on the screen. It showed a brown bear standing on its back legs in a forest. This is called a grizzly bear. It weighs 800 pounds, can run 40 miles per hour, and has claws 5 inches long. Marcus thought about the nature documentaries he had watched about bears. Yes, bears were dangerous, and you needed to be very careful around them. But people camped in bear country all the time. There were rules to follow and safety steps to take, but it was not impossible to be safe. The humans live in the same areas as these monsters, the professor said in a voice full of amazement. They go into the forests where the bears live. They build houses near them. Some humans even study bears up close and take pictures of them. Blubder's pink water was now turning red because he was so scared. Professor, how do any humans stay alive? That is the mystery, Professor Zelenothi answered. Our research team thinks the humans must have some kind of special protection we cannot see. Or maybe they are much more dangerous than they look. Marcus felt a strange feeling in his stomach. These aliens thought humans were either incredibly lucky or secretly very dangerous. They could not understand that people on Earth had just learned to live with the animals around them. Now, I will show you the most terrifying discovery of all, the professor said. She pressed a button, and the screen showed a picture that made Marcus's heart stop. It was a picture of a human family having a picnic. A mother, father, and 2 children. Sitting on a blanket in a park, they were smiling and looked completely happy and normal. This Professor Zelenothi said in a whisper, is a human family. They are having what they call a picnic in an open area. Look carefully at the background. Marcus looked and saw what had scared his professor so much. In the distance behind the family, you could see a few deer eating grass. Normal, peaceful deer that people saw in parks every day. Those creatures behind them, the professor continued, are called deer. They look harmless. But our research shows they kill more humans in vehicle crashes than many other Terran predators, and this family is sitting calmly near them, acting like there's no danger at all. Marcus realized that his alien classmates thought everything on Earth was a deadly monster. Even deer, even things that humans thought of as normal and safe. He began to understand that he was not just different from his classmates. He was from a world they thought was impossible to survive on. The professor looked directly at Marcus for a moment, and he saw something new in her eyes. Suspicion. She was starting to wonder about the calm human student who never seemed afraid of anything. Marcus sat very still in his chair, trying not to show any emotion on his face. But inside, he was amazed by what he was hearing. His professor and classmates thought his home world was a nightmare planet full of deadly monsters. Things he had grown up with, animals he had seen in zoos and nature parks, were being described like creatures from horror stories. Professor Zelenothi was still looking at him with suspicious eyes. She had noticed that Marcus was the only student who never looked scared, never pressed the red button, and never asked how to avoid these creatures. Instead, he asked questions about how they lived and what they ate. Marcus, the professor said slowly, "You seem very interested in these Terran monsters." Most students can barely look at the pictures. A few students who were still in the classroom turned to look at Marcus. Blubter's pink water was still red with fear medicine. Zixmel had stopped shaking but was now completely gray. They all wondered how Marcus could stay so calm. "I just think they are interesting," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice normal. "I like learning about different kinds of animals." "Animals?" Professor Zelenothi repeated the word like it was strange. "Marcus, these are not just animals. These are apex predators from the most dangerous world in our galaxy. The fact that you call them animals is very unusual." Marcus realized he had made a mistake. On Earth, people called everything from cats to elephants to sharks animals, but to these aliens, the word animal probably meant something small and harmless. "Let me show you more," the professor continued, watching Marcus carefully. The screen changed to show a large orange and black striped cat walking through tall grass. This is called a tiger. It is a solitary hunter that can weigh up to 600 pounds. It hunts by hiding and jumping on its prey from behind. Marcus looked at the tiger on the screen. He thought about all the times he had seen tigers at the zoo safely behind glass walls, remembered school trips where his class had learned about tiger conservation and how people were working to protect them. "The tiger's bite," Professor Zelenothi continued, "can crush the bones of creatures much larger than itself. Its claws can cut through almost anything, and it can jump more than 30 feet in a single leap." Blubter made a scared bubble sound. "How do the humans protect themselves from these monsters?" Professor Zelenothi looked at her notes. "It is what makes it so strange. According to our research, humans do not hide from tigers. Some humans actually work to protect tigers. They study them. They take pictures of them. They even try to increase the number of tigers on their planet." The remaining students made sounds of complete confusion. Why would anyone want more deadly monsters around? Marcus could not stay quiet anymore. "Professor," he said, What if the humans do not think these creatures are monsters? The room became completely silent. Professor Zelenothi stared at Marcus with all four of her eyes. What do you mean, Marcus? Well, Marcus said carefully, maybe the humans see these creatures differently. Maybe they think of them as just normal parts of their world. Zixmal made a high squeaking sound. How could anyone think these nightmare beasts are normal? Marcus felt his heart beating fast. He was about to say something that would change everything. What if I told you that humans swim in the ocean? For fun, even though they know sharks are there? What if I told you that humans go camping in forests where bears live? What if I told you that some humans work in jobs where they study these animals up close? Professor Zelenothi took a step back. Marcus, how could you possibly know so much about human behavior? Our research team spent months studying Terra, and they barely survived the experience. And what if I told you, Marcus continued, his voice getting stronger, that humans have lived with these animals for thousands of years? That they have learned how to be safe around them? The children on Terra grow up learning about these animals in school? The professor's blue skin was turning pale.
Marcus.
You are talking like you have been to Terra yourself, but that is impossible. No civilian ships are allowed to go there. It is marked as too dangerous for anyone except trained research teams. Marcus stood up slowly from his chair, looked around the room at his few remaining classmates. They were all staring at him with fear and confusion. Professor Marcus said quietly, "What if I told you that I did not come here from some peaceful world like my classmates? What if I told you that I grew up swimming in oceans with sharks, that I went camping in forests with bears, that I learned about tigers and lions and elephants in school when I was 6 years old?" Professor Zelenothi dropped her teaching device. It hit the floor with a loud crash. "Marcus, what are you saying?" "I am saying," Marcus replied, "that my home planet has a yellow star called Sol. I am saying that I grew up on the third planet from that star. I am saying that the world you call Terra, the world you think is full of deadly monsters, is the world I call home." Blubder's water tank started bubbling wildly. Zixmal turned completely white and fell off his chair. The other students started making panic sounds. "You are telling me," Professor Zelenothi said in a whisper, "that you are human? That you are from Terra?" "Yes," Marcus said simply. "I am human. And everything you have been teaching about my world is true, but also completely wrong." "How can it be true and wrong?" the professor asked. Marcus smiled for the first time since. The lessons began. "It is true that all these animals exist on my world. It is true that they are dangerous. But you are wrong about what that means for humans." He walked to the front of the classroom. His classmates moved away from him like he was dangerous. "Humans do not survive on Terra because we are lucky," Marcus explained. "We do not survive because we hide from these animals. We survive because we learn to live with them. We learn to understand them. We learn to respect them and be careful around them." Professor Zelenothi was breathing fast, but how is that possible? "These creatures should have killed all humans long ago. Because," Marcus said, "humans are not weak creatures who need to hide from everything dangerous. We are the species that learn to make fire to keep predators away. We are the species that learn to build tools and weapons. We are the species that learn to work together to survive." He looked around the room at his terrified classmates. He had been thinking about this all wrong. You see pictures of tigers and sharks and bears, and you think, how do humans survive with these monsters? But you should be asking a different question. "What question?" Professor Zelenothi asked. Marcus's smile got bigger. "You should be asking what kind of species becomes the top predator on a planet full of creatures like this." The room became completely silent, except for the sound of Blubder, scared bubbling. Everyone was staring at Marcus with new understanding. He was not just a student from a dangerous world, he was a predator from a world of predators. He had been sitting in their classroom all along. The silence in the classroom was so complete that Marcus could hear the soft humming of the air system. His classmates stared at him like they were seeing him for the first time. And in a way they were. Professor Zelenothi was the first to speak. Her voice was very quiet and shaky. "Marcus, if you are really human, if you are really from Terra, then you are the most dangerous being that has ever been in this classroom." Marcus looked confused. "Dangerous? Professor, I have been coming to this class for weeks. I have never hurt anyone. I just take notes and ask questions. But you are a predator, Zixmal whispered from where he was still sitting on the floor. You come from a world where only the strongest and most deadly creatures can survive. That means you must be stronger and more deadly than all of them. Marcus shook his head. You still do not understand. Humans are not the strongest animals on Earth. We are not the fastest or the biggest or the most poisonous. Tiger is stronger than me. A cheetah is faster than me. A shark has better senses than me. Then how do humans control Terra? Professor Zelenothi asked. Marcus thought for a moment about how to explain it. We use our brains. We work together. We make tools. We adapt to anything. He walked back to the big screen and pointed at the picture of the tiger that was still showing. You see this tiger and think it is a perfect killing machine, and you are right. But humans learn to study tigers. We learned where they live, what they eat, when they hunt. We learn to stay away from them when we need to, and how to help them when they need us. Blubder made a confused bubble sound. Help them? Why would you help such dangerous monsters? Because they are not monsters, Marcus said patiently. They are just animals trying to live their lives just like we are. Tigers do not hunt humans because they hate us. They hunt because they are hungry. If we give them enough space and enough food, they leave us alone. Professor Zelenothi was writing down everything Marcus said. But Marcus, our research team saw humans doing impossible things. They saw humans swimming with creatures that could eat them. They saw humans walking calmly near animals that should terrify them. Marcus smiled. Let me tell you about my last vacation before I came to the academy. I went scuba diving in the ocean near my home. I swam down 60 feet underwater to look at coral reefs. The remaining students made scared sounds. Swimming underwater? On purpose? While I was down there, Marcus continued, I saw 3 reef sharks swimming nearby. They were beautiful. They swam around me for a few minutes, looked at me with curiosity, then swam away. It was one of the best moments of my life. Zixmal was shaking again. You swam with sharks? On purpose? For fun? As Marcus said. Because I knew they were not interested in eating me. Reef sharks almost never attack humans. They eat fish and small creatures. I was too big and probably tasted wrong to them. So they were safe to swim with, if I followed the rules. Rules? Professor Zelenothi asked. Do not make sudden movements. Do not corner them. Do not touch them. Give them space to swim away if they want to. Simple rules that keep everyone safe. Marcus looked around the room. That is what you do not understand about humans in Terra. We do not survive by being the biggest predators. We survive by being smart enough to learn the rules of living with every other creature on our planet. Professor Zelenothi put down her pen. Marcus, I need to ask you something important. Our research team reported that humans might be more dangerous than they appear. They said humans might be hiding their true nature. Is that true? Marcus thought about this question carefully. In a way, yes, but not the way you think. What do you mean? Humans are dangerous, Marcus said slowly. But not because we have claws or poison or big teeth. We are dangerous because we never give up. We can live in deserts where nothing else can survive. We can live in frozen places where the cold should kill us. We can live on mountains where the air is too thin to breathe. He walked closer to his classmates. Some of them moved back in their seats. We are dangerous because we can learn anything, Marcus continued. If we need to swim, we learn to swim. If we need to climb, we learn to climb. If we need to build something, we learn to build it. We can eat almost anything. We can sleep almost anywhere. We can adapt to almost any situation. Professor Zelenothi was breathing fast again. So humans are not just survivors. You are adapters. Yes, Marcus said. And that is why we live with sharks and tigers and bears. We learned how to adapt to living with them. We learn their rules and we follow them. Blubter made a small sound. Marcus, are you dangerous to us? Marcus looked at the small furry being with kind eyes. Blubter, I have been sitting next to you in classes for weeks. Have I ever hurt you? Have I ever threatened you? Have I ever made you feel unsafe? No, Blubter admitted. That is because humans are only dangerous when we need to be, Marcus explained. When we are threatened, when someone we care about is in danger, when we need to survive. But most of the time, we just want to learn and be friends and live peacefully. Professor Zelenothi looked at Marcus with new understanding. So humans are like sleeping predators. Maybe, Marcus said, but I think of it differently. We are a species that learn to choose when to be dangerous and when to be peaceful. We learn to control our predator instincts instead of letting them control us. The classroom was quiet for a moment, then Zixmal slowly stood up and walked closer to Marcus. Marcus, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were taking notes about all those terrible creatures from other worlds, were you thinking about ways to fight them? Marcus laughed, and the sound made everyone jump. No, Zixmal. I was thinking about how interesting they were. I was wondering if humans could learn to live peacefully with them too, if we ever met them. Professor Zelenothi put down all her papers. Marcus, I think this changes everything about how we understand Terra and humans. Would you be willing to help me teach this class? Would you share more stories about how humans really live on your world? Marcus nodded. I would be happy to help. But Professor, can I ask you to change one thing about how you teach this class? What is that? Stop calling my world a death world full of monsters, Marcus said with a smile. Start calling it home to the species that learn to live with nature instead of fighting against it. As the class ended, word began to spread throughout the academy. They had a human student, a real human from the legendary death world Terra. But he was not the terrifying predator they had expected. He was something much more interesting, a being who had learned to find peace and friendship on a world that most species thought was impossible to survive. And slowly, the other students began to realize that maybe humans were not monsters. Maybe they were teachers who could show the galaxy a new way to understand the dangerous and beautiful universe they all shared.